everyone, and welcome to Starter TV. As the pace of change continues to accelerate, the question becomes how we keep up and even thrive. We have Frederick Marshall joining us today to talk about his new book, Thrive, An Anecdote to Future Shock. Well, Fred, it's great to have you with us today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, so great to be here.
So, start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and your background and your career journey.
Well, I started out, my dad was a doctor, and so I started out as a biochemist and molecular biologist because I didn't want to be a doctor. I saw how hard he worked and how stressful it was, and I said, no, I don't think so. Did that for several years, ended up working at SmithKline Beckman in their molecular pharmacology group. Didn't really enjoy the research as much as I thought I would. And so I decided to go into sales and marketing and have not looked back. Then 30 years ago, I started a company called Quantum Learning that focused on launching brands for the pharmaceutical industry, biotech industry. And since then, I've worked with all of the greats of that world, Genentech, Pfizer, Amgen. It's easier to list the companies we haven't worked with. And I did that for 30 years, and that was super fun, so interesting, such a great thing to be able to launch products that are literally saving lives. It's gratifying at lots of different levels.
Mhm.
And then a couple of years ago, after 30 years, I decided I need to do something different, and retired and wrote a book, Thrive: The Antidote to Future Shock.
Yes. And no, that's a great background, great story. And so tell us what inspired you to write the book.
Well, about 8 years ago, I started investing in AI startups and AI companies in general and really became obsessed. I've always been interested in neuroscience. I've always been interested in neural nets and how they work. And when I learned how AI functions, it's really a neural net. You're training the net, and all the experience is stored in the weights between the neurons. And it just made sense to me. I jumped in a big way. And because I get the pitch decks and I get access to the data rooms, I can see what's coming. And I thought, wow, nobody's really prepared for what's coming. It's going to be a lot. And the big thing that's happening right now is AI is improving itself, and the so-called recursive self-improvement. And that means that it's going to get better and better and better, and it's going exponential. And so how do you keep up? How do you thrive in a world that's changing that
Yeah.
fast and improving that quickly? And I know people are starting to feel it. I'm sure you can hear and see in the news media the increase in conversations around, is my job at risk? What happens when these entry level jobs go away? How do we help young people develop and grow into roles when they can't even get their first step? So for all those reasons and a bunch more, I felt I needed to do something to prepare people, not just for today, but for what's unfolding.
And so in your book, you talk about future shock, right?
I
What
do.
does that look like, and what does it look like in today's workplace?
So the original Future Shock, written in 1970 by Alvin Toffler, said that he was kind of the first to recognize that change was going to happen really quickly. Information technology was going to overwhelm us with too much content. Way back in 70, you could see this coming, but also social change and that kind of disorientation and kind of, it's too much. I can't process this.
Yeah.
Kind of leads to what he described as future shock. Well, it took a while, but it's here and we're living it now. And so the question that I wanted to answer is, well, what do you do if you're living in a world of future shock? How do you manage your life and build a great life, create a great future, not just survive?
Yeah. And so we are living in this time, right, of rapid technological change, social
Hmm.
change from AI, health breakthroughs. Why does
Yeah.
this feel so overwhelming for so many people?
Well, I think it's a bunch of different things. First, the sheer volume of information that is streaming into our lives and our worlds. There's a interesting stat that I came across the other day. The average millennial is looking at their phone about 100 times a day. They pick it up 100 times a day, usually because something pinged them. They got a DM, they got a message, an email, a notification of some kind. And it's really hard to manage your brain when you just open your phone and there are news feeds bombarding us with pretty negative news. Some people say it's a crisis news network kind of environment where it just everything bad that's happening in the world, you're going to hear about it. Well, we weren't built for that. We were built for simpler times biologically. And so that's one force. I think a second one is the attention economy. Um, the whole model, the business model is capture their attention, hold it inside the ecosystem, hang ads in front of people, make money. And so anything and everything that captures attention is what gets repeated. And oftentimes the things that capture people's attention the most are either dopamine hits or cortisol hits, right? Get you really fired up. Ooh, how cool is that? Or, oh my God, what's going to happen next? And that creates a kind of chronic pounding of our nervous system and really makes it hard to stay focused. I think between those two, that's probably enough. There are other forces, but those are the big ones.
Yeah. And Thrive introduces the Super 8 personal ecosystem, right? A way to sort of
Mm-hmm.
take control of your life and handle this rapid technological change more effectively. Can you
Yeah.
explain the idea?
Yeah, well, if you go out in nature, what causes one species to do well? Well, it's they don't do it on their own. It's the ecosystem they're growing up in. I had a interesting experience. I planted a bunch of cherry trees down our driveway. At the bottom of the driveway, it's windy and dry. At the top of the driveway, it's protected and it's moist. And the trees at the top, the trunk is like this big, and the ones at the bottom, they're this big. And if you ever wanted an example of the impact of environment on the thriving of something, it's the perfect model, because the farther down the driveway you get, the scrawnier and more disease ridden they are. And when I saw that, I thought, environment and context is really important in someone's thriving. It's such a huge factor. And so the goal is to build an ecosystem where everyone and everything that you care about thrives. And so I just identified the 8 elements of what that ecosystem could be. And some of them are obvious, but what's important is if you get usually our lives are kind of going all over the place like this, different things pulling different directions. If you can just even get them partly aligned, things start flowing and moving. You get some momentum. So the first 4, I'll just share the first 4. Your neural net, your mind. If you want to elevate your life, elevate your mind. Second is your biological self. We got to take care of our bodies. Everybody knows that. The third is relationships. The people you surround yourself have such a huge impact on our state of mind, our ability to think clearly, where we focus our attention, what we define as important or not important. So, curating the people around you is a huge part of building a great ecosystem. And I've had the privilege of surrounding myself with some pretty fantastic people, including Peter Diamandis, who wrote the foreword to the book, and the people that he has brought into my world. And then the fourth are systems. If you want to reach great heights, you need great systems. And the systems that we've had, maybe they worked for a while, but they can't keep pace with all the change and information flow that's going on today. So building great systems that kind of help you separate the signal from the noise and just focus on a handful of things that really matter, it's so powerful. There are other things as well, but those are 4.
Yeah. And so with AI and automation sort of reshaping industries, how
Mm-hmm.
should leaders sort of balance these advancements in technology with human capability and well-being?
Oh, I love that question. So, if you're a business leader, the focus is what in my world is strategically worth developing out using the latest tools, which happen to be AI. And a good example of that might be, if you're in the filmmaking business, where can you apply AI? Well, you could apply it to, reducing lip smacks and pops on the microphone. AI can help you do that rather than somebody doing that by hand. And that's a work stream that you've improved, but it's not going to change the business. But if you look at the building blocks of the business, there's pre-production, where they're doing everything before they start filming. There's production, when they film. Ben Affleck is bringing in somebody to do the shooting. And then there's post-production. So one of the things that Ben Affleck did, and he recently sold this company to Netflix for an undisclosed amount of money. I'm sure it was a lot. He took a look at the post-production and said, well, what are the big problems that we have in post? Well, we do all the shooting, and then, Matt Damon, let's say he's in the film, He, at the end of production, he leaves. Now we're stuck with the footage we've got. I've got to make the film from that. And you don't find out the problems until you get into post-production. You go, oh my God, this scene isn't working. What if, and I can't get Matt because he's on the next project. He won't come back. So how do I make the film work? It happens more often than you might think. So what he did was he created an AI with his team that takes all the existing footage they have from that film and then uses AI to generate pieces that are missing or change the lighting or change the angle. And AI can do that beautifully. It's transformed post-production. And Netflix thought it was so valuable, they decided they'd pay a lot of money for it. That's a good example of thinking strategically about where AI is and not getting trapped in workflows and way down here, but really thinking high level. And leaders need to do that. Now, the second part of your question is, what about how people are coping and dealing with stress in their lives and in that world? I think the second part of AI is helping people get good at giving them permission in a way to invest time and explore and develop their skills and capabilities in AI without having any concrete product at the end of it. I know it kind of contradicts what I just said, but if I feel the pressure that I have to come up with some kind of solution, that stress, if I don't know how, if I'm not fluent in all the different things that AI can do, it's going to stress me out. So giving them permission to play and test and experiment, I think is a very powerful strategy to do that.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think is kind of essential is if you're in deep inside the organization and you don't have visibility to what's important, you can't contribute at a higher level. You're stuck at your lower level. So helping people see what the larger organization is trying to do and their role in it will help, I think.
So then what would you say separates CEOs who thrive, during this time, during disruption, during this advancement of all this technology from those who might stall?
There are a couple of different parts to it. The first part is not really understanding where AI is going to have the biggest impact in their business. I think Steve Jobs famously said, never let the technology lead. Instead, start with the business problem or the problem the customer has or what they're trying to solve or something strategic that's meaningful to them. And then ask which technologies are relevant to that situation. So lead with the problem and lead with the need first. I think that's one really huge area. The second area is, and I've seen this happen recently, it's, measure how many hours a week people are using AI. Oh boy, I'm not sure that's a good idea.
Yeah.
It's not giving people a sense of direction and purpose. It's just asking them to wander. And, intentionally playing and wandering are different.
Yeah. How would you say they're different?
Well, if you say, go and experiment with AI, here's our larger vision and goal and what we're trying to do at this department or at this function or at this organizational level, and see what you can come up with, go have fun with it. Kind of like Google does. They say, take some time every week to just focus on interesting stuff that you're curious about. That's one thing. Another thing to say, you guys need to get better at AI. Now go and do that. No direction, no clarity, no roadmap. It's a prescription for stress.
What role does mindset play in building resilient, high-performing teams, especially during periods of rapid change?
Yeah, this is a great question. I think the single most important mindset every CEO should have is an investment mindset. And that means asking yourself, what's worth developing? What's worth taking 2 or 3 or 5 years to build? Even though you might not have the whole path laid out and things are changing quickly. That's all true. But you have to think in multiple time horizons and work to develop the full potential of the things that matter in your world. Depending on what your world is, that'll be different. In the world of post-production, Ben Affleck said, well, this is a problem that's worth solving. So let's focus on that. I think that's probably a good starting point.
Mm-hmm. You also write about human AI collaboration as a skill.
Mm-hmm.
How does understanding this relationship help people see AI as an opportunity rather than a threat?
Oh, yeah. This is another important question. The most common reaction I get when I ask people about AI is scary. and their
Yeah.
face does this face and scary. And I go, well, why do you say that? I think it's the coolest thing ever. I think it has all kinds of opportunity. It's, glass half empty, half full kind of mindset. So to me, the second mindset is really what could I do with this mindset? A strategic curiosity mindset. Rather than asking, how is this going to hurt me? Ask, what could we do with this? And you can think in different levels. Level one is, how can it help me improve this workflow? Level two is, how can it help me improve this system? Level three, how could it help me improve this function in the business? And sort of run through the levels and ask, what could it do that we've never done before? Because sometimes, automating a workflow is one level of value, but reimagining what's possible is a completely different level of value. And to give you an example of that, George Lucas, a while ago with his company Industrial Light and Magic, had this vision of, what if we had a giant LED screen that was 20 feet tall, and you had 270 degrees, right? A huge arc of this thing. And we put the background for the Mandalorian on that, and we shoot the whole film inside this little ecosystem. Well, they built that, and that has worked beautifully. Now what they're doing is using AI to regenerate scenes. So, if you're the director and you say, well, I don't really like the way the sun's coming over the hills there, let's regenerate it and having it start over here. Or, I don't like the way those shadows are. I don't like those things. Let's get rid of them and replace it with something else. And you regenerate the background. Well, that's a completely new capability. And that's happening right now. It's super exciting. And it's gonna transform not just the workflows and the processes, but it's going to transform what they're able to do. And that's exciting.
Yeah. You also introduced the idea of upgrading our personal operating system.
Mm-hmm.
What does that practically mean for a working professional?
Yeah, well, so the way to think about it is, because our brains are actually a neural net, we think of our mind as our mind and we think in psychological terms, but it's actually a neural net. It's the biggest neural net, on the planet practically. And so, how do you train that neural net? What do you feed that neural net? And we feed it with what we pay attention to. We feed it with the relationships we have. We feed it with the systems that we build and the environments, the ecosystems that we participate in. And they end up shaping our mind and literally determining our future. Here's the easiest way to think about it. What you pay attention to determines what your future is going to be. Don't let the algorithm decide that. Don't let competition decide that. Don't let market dynamics or the noise of the marketplace or the world or the global economy. There's a lot of distraction happening right now as we record this. Don't let any of that distract you from the bigger things that you want to do to build your own personal foundation model in the same way that ChatGPT has a foundation model that's been trained up. You can train yourself. And, I tell the Michael Phelps story of how he trained under all these adverse conditions so that when it came to swim time and to compete in the Olympics, when his goggles started to leak, it was no big deal. He just kept paddling through and set a new world record because he had trained under adversity. He trained his neural net to function and execute flawlessly. We can do the same thing.
And you've trained over 130,000 people globally.
Mm-hmm.
What consistent traits do you see in these high performing individuals?
I love this question. So quantum learning was famous for the following strategy. We would ask our clients to give us a bell curve of performers, consistent top performers and consistent middle performers, and then everybody else. And we'd take two pools, consistent middle and consistent top. And then we'd randomize them, blind ourselves so we didn't know who was who, and we'd spend 2 days with them observing actual behavior. And we got a lot of really insightful data from that. Of all the things that we learned, and we learned a lot, there's like at least 50 things that we learned from that. 3 things came out over and over again, and they are absolutely what top performers do. And interestingly enough, and this was, by the way, is done at Genentech and Pfizer and Apple and many other companies. What we learned was top performers lead with initiative in addition to responding to others. Middle performers tend to be more responsive to others, not so much leading with initiative. So when you wake up in the morning, do you know what you want to get done? Do you know what the week is about? Do you know what's your must get accomplished this week? That initiative, that bias to action is really important. Doesn't mean they're not responsive. They are, but they're leaning in and leading with initiative first. So that's one axis. The second is internal focus or external focus. So internal is, my goals, my needs, my values. And external is what's going on in the world, what's going on in this environment, what's going on in this doctor's office, what's going on with them, what are their systems. And the best performers have this really interesting balance of about 2/3 external and about 1/3 internal. And that was interesting because middle performers tended to be all externally focused and not internally focused, or all internally focused and not externally focused. Well, when you put these two together, you get a really interesting combination. Mm-hmm. And we found that the top performers tended to lead with initiative, but were still responsive, but tended to lead with initiative, tended to be mostly other focused, but still focused on what they needed to get done. They wouldn't leave the week without getting their things, checking off their list of stuff that needed to happen. And that has held up across so many different industries and companies and levels of organizations. It's really fascinating.
Yeah. And you've been part of some high stakes reinventions. What does reinvention really mean to you today?
Oh, yeah. I think if you just let go of all of your assumptions, which is hard to do because many of the assumptions we're making are unconscious. We don't even know we're making them, but really let go of all your assumptions and ask, what could this be? What's worth developing, even if it's hard to do? Sometimes the things that are the hardest to do have the greatest impact. I think about SpaceX and Elon Musk in this regard. He realized that the biggest barrier, what's the goal in space? It's cost per ton to get it up there. It's so expensive to put a ton of stuff in low Earth orbit. We got to get that cost down. Otherwise we can't do this. He said, okay, well, if we can reuse the rockets, we can bring the cost down. If we have modular components that we can swap out, like the engine at the bottom, we can build rockets and we can fly them and turn these around. Not as fast as airplanes, but pretty fast. That kind of thinking, I think, is the right way to think about it.
Yeah. And so you have a portfolio of AI investments, right? For 25. What is your portfolio telling you about where the real opportunities are?
Oh man, it's all roads lead to agentic AI. I think. I don't know from an investor point of view or from a market impact point of view, because those are different questions.
You can give us your perspective on both.
I think from an investor point of view, agentic AI is going to be important, but small companies doing little projects, might not be the best investment. You might be better with platform companies who are enabling those things. But from an impact point of view, agentic AI is going to change our world like nothing we've ever seen. And it's going to start with, writing code, which it's already doing. And then it's going to lead to swarms of agents that can do things in the background and in parallel, and that helps you scale. You can build systems with AI to do things for you and run in the background, just like your air conditioning runs in the background. You don't think about it. You just set the temperature and live your life. You can set your agents to go out and do things for you. And it's already happening, but it's going to get so much better in the next 18 months.
And with things just changing at a rapid pace, how should professionals rethink learning to stay relevant today?
Yeah, great question. This sounds trite and everybody knows this already, but you have to have a certain block of time every week in your calendar that's dedicated to self-development and to learning. If you don't, you're going to fall behind. Sam Altman had a really interesting observation. He said the best CEOs that, he invests in when he was, playing that role, the best CEOs are the ones that keep learning. And the ones that run into trouble are the ones who stop learning. They stop growing. They stop developing. And so I think it's really essential to constantly be learning and have that strategic curiosity I mentioned before, and then
Mhm.
operationalize it, make it a part of your calendar. I think the fastest way to accelerate that is who you hang out with. And so being really strategic about curating people who can open doors to new worlds is really good advice. So I became friends with Peter Diamandis 7 years ago. He has opened so many doors. It's unbelievable the people that I get to interact with because of one person. And there are people in your life who can be that gateway to an entirely new world. So curate the people and block out time.
That is a great starting point. Yeah. And finally, where do you see the balance between, again, human capability and technology evolving in the next, 5 to 10 years?
Uh, Boy, wouldn't we all love to know the answer to that question? I'll take an educated guess. So we know that robotics are going to fill our lives. We know that Elon and his Terafab are going to be cranking out, the next generation robot with good hands that can do things that have high utility for human beings. And we know that it's highly likely that there'll be things, like software as a service. There'll be robot capabilities as a service. So you buy a robot and you download the capability you want. You want them to mow your lawn. There's an app for that robot. You want somebody who does your taxes. There's another app for that. I think it'll end up being something like that. But to me, it gets right back to where we started, which is if you know what you want, then you'll curate whatever technology is available to help you achieve that. And I think equally importantly is knowing what not to do. We were talking earlier before we started this idea of innovation isn't always progress. Sometimes the smartest move is to say, no, I'm not even going to go there. And knowing what to say no to, I think, is just as important as knowing what to say yes to.
Well, Fred, thank you so much for joining us. This was great. Thrive
Thank
is a
you.
great guide for, individuals and leaders, helping us stay grounded and focused and intentional in a world that's just, changing faster than ever. So we really appreciate your insight.
Oh, thank you. So great to be here and really lovely to share those thoughts with you.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll see you next time on Starter TV.
All right, take care.